in public, verbally, spoken, read out loud. And let God's Ruach HaKodesh work through His Word, through our ears and into our hearts. So today, I'm going to start off with a blessing before our reading. But I am not going to say the blessing. I'm going to read it. I'm going to let Yeshua say the blessing from many centuries ago. And this will come from Mark chapter 12, beginning with verse 28. So he's going to give the blessing today from many centuries ago, reaching forward to our time and day today, to hear the words of Yeshua as he gives this tremendous blessing upon the Word of God. Now, if we have time, there's something I want to read later, if we have time. But I will preface this much. Yeshua is going to give a blessing that is the foremost prayer of Israel and has been for centuries, even before Yeshua came and taught in the land of Israel to the Jewish people. This was the prayer, and it's prayed every single day. One of the Torah teachers came up and heard them engaged in this discussion. Seeing that Yeshua answered them well, he asked him, which is the most important mitzvah of them all? Well, we have to back up because you know what? We need a little more context for the setting. So I don't want to just lift this right out. So let's back up to verse 18. Then some Sadducees came to him. They are the ones who say there's no such thing as resurrection. So they put to him a she'elah. Rabbi, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife with no child, his brother must take the wife and have children to preserve the man's family line. There were 7 brothers. The first one took a wife, and when he died, he left no children. Then the second one took her and died without leaving children. And the third, likewise. And none of the 7 left children. Last of all, the woman also died. In the resurrection, whose wife will she be? For all 7 had her as wife. Yeshua said to them, isn't this the reason that you go astray? Because you are ignorant both of the Tanakh and the power of God. For when people rise from the dead, neither men nor women marry. They are like angels in heaven. And as for the dead being raised, haven't you read in the book of Moshe, in the passage about the bush, how God said to him, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov. He is God, not of the dead, but of the living. You are going far astray. One of the Torah teachers came up and heard them engaged in this discussion. Seeing that Yeshua answered them well, he asked him, which is the most important mitzvah of them all? Yeshua answered, the most important is, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Yisrael, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you are to love Adonai, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your understanding, and with all your strength. Much to my dismay, over the years, there were years, I don't know how many, there were years when I thought this passage was part of the New Testament Christianity. That what Yeshua was saying here was something new, part of the new covenant, because I had been taught replacement theology and that the law was judgment. No grace. You have to come to the New Testament for God's grace and love and mercy. Well, we see how foolish that is, but there's still many caught up in, they have the blinders on. They have the blinders on. So we pray God remove the blinders, as he has blessed us with as well. Not to take pride in our insight, our marvelous insight, our ability to comprehend and understand God's word, but to recognize this is God's grace. This is God's grace. And if we have time, we will expand upon that. By God's grace. Parashah 45. Ve'echanan, I pleaded. Devarim, chapter 3, verse 23 through chapter 7, 11. Moshe speaking. Then I pleaded with Adonai. Adonai Elohim, you have begun to reveal your greatness to your servant and your strong hand. For what other God is there in heaven and on earth that can do the works and mighty deeds that you do? Please, let me go across and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that wonderful hill country and the Lebanon. But Adonai was angry with me on account of you, and he didn't listen to me. Adonai said to me, enough from you. Don't say another word to me about this matter. Climb up to the top of Pisgah and look out to the west, north, south, and east. Look with your eyes, but you will not go across this Jordan. However, commission Yehoshua, encourage him, and strengthen him, for he will lead this people across and enable them to inherit the land that you will see. So we stayed in the valley across from Beit Peor. Chapter 4. Now, Yisrael, listen to the laws and rulings I am teaching you in order to follow them so that you will live. Then you will go in and take possession of the land that Adonai, the God of your fathers, is giving you in order to obey the mitzvot of Adonai your God, which I am giving you. Do not add to what I am saying, and do not subtract from it. You saw with your own eyes what Adonai did at Baal Peor, that Adonai destroyed from among you all the men who followed Baal Peor. But you who stuck with Adonai, your God, are still alive today. Every one of you. Look, I have taught you laws and rulings, just as Adonai my God ordered me, so that you can behave accordingly in the land and follow them. For then all peoples will see you as having wisdom and understanding. When they hear of all these laws, they will say, this great nation is surely a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has God as close to them as Adonai our God is? Whenever we call on him, what great nation is there that has laws and rulings as just as this entire Torah, which I am setting before you today? Only be careful and watch yourselves diligently as long as you live, so that you won't forget what you saw with your own eyes, so that these things won't vanish from your hearts. Rather, make them known to your children and grandchildren. The day you stood before Adonai your God at Horeb, when Adonai said to me, gather the people to me, and I will make them hear my very words, so that they will learn to hold me in awe as long as they live on earth, and so that they will teach their children. You approached and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain blazed with fire to the heart of heaven, with darkness, clouds, and thick mist. Then Adonai spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no shape. There was only a voice. He proclaimed his covenant to you, which he ordered you to obey, the 10 words, and he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. At that time, Adonai ordered me to teach you laws and rulings, so that you would live by them in the land you are entering, in order to take possession of it. Therefore, watch out for yourselves, since you did not see a shape of any kind on the day Adonai spoke to you in Horeb from the fire. Do not become corrupt and make yourselves a carved image having the shape of any figure, not a representation of a human being, male or female, or a representation of any animal on earth, or a representation of any bird that flies in the air, or a representation of anything that creeps along on the ground, or a representation of any fish in the water below the shoreline. For the same reason, do not look up at the sky, at the sun, moon, stars, and everything in the sky, and be drawn away to worship and serve them. Adonai, your God, has allotted these to all the peoples under the entire sky. No, Adonai has taken and brought out of the smelting furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of inheritance for him, as you are today. But Adonai was angry with me on account of you, and swore that I would not cross the Jordan and go into that good land which Adonai your God is giving you to inherit. Rather, I must die in this land and not cross the Jordan. But you are to cross and take possession of that good land. Watch out for yourselves, so that you won't forget the covenant of Adonai your God, which he made with you. And make yourself a carved image, a representation of anything forbidden to you by Adonai your God. For Adonai your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. When you have had children and grandchildren, lived a long time in the land, become corrupt, and made a carved image, a representation of something, and thus done what is evil in the sight of Adonai your God, and provoked him, I call on the sky and the earth to witness against you today, that you will quickly disappear from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You will not prolong your days there, but will be completely destroyed. Adonai will scatter you among the peoples and among the nations to which Adonai will lead you away. You will be left few in number. There you will serve gods which are the product of human hands, made of wood and stone, which can't see, hear, eat, or smell. However, from there you will seek Adonai your God, and you will find him if you search after him with all your heart and being. In your distress, when all these things have come upon you, in the Akarit Hayamim, you will return to Adonai your God and listen to what he says. For Adonai your God is a merciful God. He will not fail you, destroy you, or forget the covenant with your ancestors, which he swore to them. Indeed, inquire about the past before you were born, since the day God created human beings on the earth. From one end of heaven to the other, has there ever been anything as wonderful as this? Has anyone heard anything like it? Did any other people ever hear the voice of God speaking out of a fire as you have heard and stay alive? Or has God ever tried to go and take for himself a nation from the very bowels of another nation by means of ordeals, signs, wonders, war, a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and great terrors? like all that Adonai your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes. This was shown to you so that you would know that Adonai is God and there is no other beside him. From heaven he caused you to hear his voice in order to instruct you. And on earth he caused you to see his great fire. And you heard his very words coming out from the fire. Because he loved your ancestors, chose their descendants after them, and brought you out of Egypt with his presence and great power, in order to drive out ahead of you nations greater and stronger than you, so that he could bring you in and give you their land as an inheritance, as is the case today. Know today and establish it in your heart that Adonai is God in heaven above and on earth below. There is no other. Therefore, you are to keep his laws and mitzvot, which I am giving you today, so that it will go well with you and with your children after you, and so that you will prolong your days in the land Adonai your God is giving you forever. Then Moshe separated 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan toward the sunrise, to which a killer might flee. That is, someone who kills by mistake a person whom he did not previously hate, and upon fleeing to one of these cities might live there. The cities were Betzer in the desert, in the flatland, for the Reuvenite, Ramoth in Gilad for the Gadi, and Golan in Bashan for the Manasseh. This is the Torah which Moshe placed before the people of Yisrael. These are the instructions, laws, and rulings which Moshe presented to the people of Yisrael after they had come out of Egypt, beyond the Jordan River, in a valley across from Beit Peor, in the land of Sichon, king of the Amori, who lived at Heshbon, whom Moshe and the people of Yisrael defeated when they came out of Egypt. And they took possession of his land and the land of Og, king of Bashan, the 2 kings of the Amori, who were beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, from Aurora on the edge of the Arnon Valley to Mount Sion, that is Mount Hermon, with all the Arava beyond the Jordan eastward, all the way to the Dead Sea at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. Chapter 5. Then Moshe called to all Yisrael and said to them, "Listen, Yisrael, to the laws and rulings which I am announcing in your hearing today, so that you will learn them and take care to obey them. Adonai our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. Adonai did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, who are all of us here alive today. Adonai spoke with you face to face from the fire on the mountain. At that time, I stood between Adonai and you in order to tell you what Adonai was saying, because on account of the fire, you were afraid and wouldn't go up onto the mountain. He said, Aleph, I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, where you lived as slaves. Bait, you are to have no other gods before me. You're not to make for yourselves a carved image or any kind of representation of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water below the shoreline. You're not to bow down to them or serve them. For I, Adonai your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents, also the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but displaying grace to the thousandth generation of those who love me and obey my mitzvot. Gimel, you're not to misuse the name of Adonai your God, because Adonai will not leave unpunished someone who misuses his name. Dalet, observe the day of Shabbat, to set it apart as holy, as Adonai your God ordered you to do. You have 6 days to labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Shabbat for Adonai your God. On it you are not to do any kind of work, not you, your son or your daughter, not your male or female slave, not your ox, your donkey, or any of your other livestock, and not the foreigner staying with you inside the gates to your property, so that your male and female servants can rest just as you do. You are to remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Adonai your God brought you out from there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, Adonai your God has ordered you to keep the day of Shabbat. Hey, honor your father and mother, as Adonai your God orders you to do, so that you will live long and have things go well with you in the land Adonai your God is giving you. Vav, do not murder. Zion, do not commit adultery. Chet, do not steal. Tet, do not give false evidence against your neighbor. Yod, do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet your neighbor's house, his field, his male or female slave, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. These words Adonai spoke to your entire gathering at the mountain from the cloud and thick mist in a loud voice. Then it ceased. But he wrote them on 2 stone tablets, which he gave to me. When you heard the voice coming out of the darkness, as the mountain blazed with fire, you came to me, all the heads of your tribes and your leaders, and said, "Here, Adonai our God has shown us his glory and his greatness. We have heard his voice coming from the fire, and we have seen today that God does speak with human beings and they stay alive. But why should we keep risking death? This great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of Adonai our God any more, we will die. For who is there of all humanity that has heard the voice of the living God speaking from the fire as we have and stayed alive? You go near and hear everything Adonai our God says. Then you will tell us everything Adonai our God says to you, and we will listen to it and do it." Adonai heard what you were saying when you spoke to me. And Adonai said to me, "I have heard what this people has said when speaking to you, and everything they have said is good. Oh, how I wish their hearts would stay like this always, that they would fear me and obey all my mitzvot, so that it would go well with them and their children forever. Go, tell them to return to their tents, but you stand here by me, and I will tell you all the mitzvot, laws, and rulings which you are to teach them, so that they can obey them in the land I am giving them as their possession. Therefore, you are to be careful to do as Adonai your God has ordered you. You are not to deviate either to the right or the left. You are to follow the entire way which Adonai your God has ordered you, so that you will live. Things will go well with you, and you will live long in the land you're about to possess. Chapter 6. Now this is the mitzvah, the laws and rulings which Adonai your God ordered me to teach you, for you to obey in the land you are crossing over to possess, so that you will fear Adonai your God and observe all his regulations and mitzvot that I am giving you, your child, and your grandchild, as long as you live, and so that you will have long life. Therefore, listen, Yisrael, and take care to obey, so that things will go well with you, and so that you will increase greatly, as Adonai, the God of your ancestors, promised you by giving you a land flowing with milk and honey. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, Yisrael, Adonai our God, Adonai is one. And you are to love Adonai your God with all your heart, all your being, and all your resources. These words which I'm ordering you today are to be on your heart, and you are to teach them carefully to your children. You are to talk about them when you sit at home, when you're traveling on the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them on your hand as a sign, and put them at the front of a headband around your forehead, and write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates. When Adonai your God has brought you into the land he swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, that he would give you, cities great and prosperous, which you didn't build, houses full of all sorts of good things, which you didn't fill, water cisterns dug out, which you didn't dig, vineyards and olive trees, which you didn't plant, and you have eaten your fill, then be careful not to forget Adonai, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, where you lived as slaves. You are to fear Adonai your God, serve him, and swear by his name. You are not to follow other gods, chosen from the gods of the peoples around you, because Adonai your God, who is here with you, is a jealous God. If you do, the anger of Adonai your God will flare up against you, and he will destroy you from the face of the earth. Do not put Adonai your God to the test, as you tested him at Massah. Observe diligently the mitzvot of Adonai your God and his instructions and laws which he has given you. You are to do what is right and good in the sight of Adonai, so that things will go well with you, and you will enter and possess the good land Adonai swore to your ancestors, expelling all your enemies ahead of you, as Adonai said. Someday, your child will ask you, what is the meaning of the instructions, laws, and rulings which Adonai our God has laid down for you? Then you will tell your child, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Adonai brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand. Adonai worked great and terrible signs and wonders against Egypt, Pharaoh, and all his households before our very eyes. He brought us out from there in order to bring us to the land he had sworn to our ancestors that he would give us. Adonai ordered us to observe all these laws, to fear Adonai our God always for our own good, so that he might keep us alive as we are today. It will be righteousness for us if we are careful to obey all these mitzvot before Adonai our God, just as he ordered us to do. Chapter 7. Adonai your God is going to bring you into the land you will enter in order to take possession of it, and he will expel many nations ahead of you: the Hittite, Girgashi, Amori, Canaani, Perizi, Hivi, and Yevushi. 7 nations bigger and stronger than you. When he does this, when Adonai your God hands them over ahead of you, and you defeat them, you are to destroy them completely. Do not make any covenant with them. Show them no mercy. Don't intermarry with them. Don't give your daughters to his son, and don't take his daughter for your son. For he will turn your children away from following me in order to serve other gods. If this happens, the anger of Adonai will flare up against you, and he will quickly destroy you. No, treat them this way. Break down their altars. Smash their standing stones to pieces. Cut down their sacred poles and burn up their carved images completely. You are a people set apart as holy for Adonai your God. Adonai your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his own unique treasure. Adonai didn't set his heart on you or choose you because you numbered more than any other people. On the contrary, you were the fewest of all peoples. Rather, it was because Adonai loved you, and because he wanted to keep the oath which he had sworn to your ancestors, that Adonai brought you out with a strong hand and redeemed you from a life of slavery under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. From this you can know that Adonai your God is indeed God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant and extends grace to those who love him and observe his mitzvot to 1,000 generations. But he repays those who hate him to their face and destroys them. He will not be slow to deal with someone who hates him. He will repay him to his face. Therefore, you are to keep the mitzvot, laws, and rulings, which I am giving you today, and obey them. Do we have any comments?
In Exodus chapter 20, after the Ten Commandments had been given by God at the mountain, Israel was too terrified in the midst of the fire and the earthquake and the other phenomenon to hear the Lord's voice any further or any more. Directly, they were hearing his voice. So they asked that Moses listen to whatever else the Lord wanted to give them. And then they asked that after the Lord had spoken to Moses, Moses would tell them the words that God had said to them. And it's interesting that what Israel had requested in Exodus 20, Moses reminds them in Deuteronomy chapter 5, after the Ten Commandments were given again there, that what now they had asked for in Exodus 20, Moses was about to speak to them the words that God had spoken to him. So there's what we call it, finishing what Israel had asked Moses to do in the obligation. So beginning in Deuteronomy chapter 12 and going through Deuteronomy through the blessings and cursings near the end, those are all the words that God himself would have spoken to Israel that they were too terrified to hear. So now Moses is speaking to them those words. In Galatians chapter 3, for example, angels are called in as witnesses for those words. It's hard to say what they were doing, the angels were doing, but for example, they might have been ensuring that all the words that God had spoken to Moses, he was now speaking to Israel. So they are in part guarantors of the accuracy of the words that Moses spoke. So it's interesting the tie-in with the New Testament in that process and the tie-in between Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy.
Good comments. I would like to add that where I have missed the boat, so to speak, and I fear many raised in Christendom, in the theology of Christendom, have missed the boat as well, is that we do not take what happened to Israel in Egypt and the deliverance that occurred at the hand of God, we do not take that personally. We do not identify with Yisrael. And that is a great failing on our part, because then we would be more closely aligned and willing to come together with them as an erring brother, with the recognition that we should be humble because our errors are no less grievous to God over the centuries. But we don't take responsibility for that. We don't take that identification as we should, because we're enjoined in Scripture to do so. Yet we're good at absolving ourselves of wrongdoings. And even in history, when we look at the church per se, and the horrendous persecutions that occurred against the Jews by the church in history, yet we fail to take accountability or responsibility for that as well. We are so focused on the individual that we lose sight of our corporate responsibilities. And so I'd like for us to reflect on that we have responsibility to each one here in our fellowship. If we are a part of this fellowship, we are one body. And so therefore, we are exhibiting the grace of God in our relationships with each other. And so, by extension, we should also identify with Israel as well, because God is restoring them. Dr. Haney.
So in 6:16 it says, "Do not test me as you did in Massah." What was that individual test?
Could you repeat the question?
And you were reading Deuteronomy 6:16, and it says, "Do not test
Oh, okay, yes.
Yahweh as you did in, was it Massah?" Do we remember what that test is? Because as you read that, it says, "Do not test me," but then it brought back Malachi chapter 3, where it says, "Test me and prove that,"
Would you like to
they
read
ask,
that?
"You robbed me." He said, "Test me and prove. If you bring your tithes, I will open the storehouse of heaven and bless you so much that you cannot even contain it." And so it seems like this year Yah has been saying, hey, you need to identify as a slave. We need to be identifying ourselves as slaves in Babylon or in Egypt.
Oh.
I want you to realize that I am your providence. I provide everything for you. The government doesn't provide everything for you. Your employer doesn't provide everything for you. But I do. I give you your next breath. I give you your next day. I give you your wages. I give you your bread to eat, and I clothe you. You cannot do anything without me, and I'm so totally dependent upon him. I think God's preparing me, at least, through the devotions and what have you, and saying, we're going to take you through some rough times, but I need you to trust in me. I'm your groom, you're my bride. I'm going to provide and protect for you. I'm hearing you. I'm hearing your cries in Egypt or in Babylon. I'm hearing you cry, and I'm going to come rescue you here soon.
Right. Yeah, Mike, go ahead. Oh, wait. Mike, what's the mic? There we go.
So Tom asked what was the testing that they did that Yahweh warned them about, or Moses said, don't test me. This isn't because I have a good memory. I have a Thompson chain reference, so it helps me find stuff pretty quick. Good resource to have if you don't have one. So it takes us back to Exodus 17:7. And to back up, so this is where the people murmur for water. And of course, this is where Moses kind of got angry, and this is the event that kept him from seeing the promised land, or from entering into the promised land. But let's see. So there was no water for them to drink, verse 1. So the verse 2, wherefore the people did chide with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide ye with me? Wherefore do you tempt Yahweh? And the people thirsted therefore for water, and the people murmured against Moses. Wherefore it is this that thou hast brought us up out of the land of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst. So this is where Moses cried unto Yahweh, what shall I do? And so that was the testing in Exodus 17:7. Sometimes they blame, the one that Yahweh used to deliver them out, they began to complain to him because, he's the easiest one to go to. They can see him, and so we got to be careful who we complain to, and just as Tom said, our reliance should be on him, and just trust and be patient, and he will provide. But we are slaves in this nation now, and probably rightfully so, because we've turned our hearts against the Creator of heaven and earth. We've been blessed in this land, with riches, with goods, with plenty of food, and now, we're becoming enslaved to, the kings that He has placed on this earth for a specific purpose, whether we like it or not. But so we're going to go through a testing again. So for a reference, read 1 Corinthians 10, and let's take note. As you had mentioned, we should remember that as they were slaves, we are too, and be ready, or we should be relying on Him each day.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, there's an element to this that ties into our relationship primarily with God, because He's our strength, He's our foundation, He's our only hope. He's our only hope. So, and really, when we get right down to it, when things get so bad for us that we are brought to our knees, and that maybe the part of that is recognition of God's greatness and His glory, that it will be clear beyond the shadow of a doubt for anyone on this earth that it is God enabling the deliverance and not man.
I just have, maybe it's a ignorant question, but in chapter 4, verses 26, I noticed that you had said about calling on the sky and the earth to be witness against you today, that you will certainly be carried off. Okay, so what is the difference? Because mine says, I call heaven and earth. So is the sky just heaven? Because I always looked at it like the sky and heaven was beyond, But you read sky from your Bible, so.
Okay.
So my question is, am I wrong?
What chapter were you referring to?
I was returning to chapter 4.
4?
Verse 26. My Bible says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today. And I noticed that in your Bible it says sky. So all I'm saying is, I know that it talks about being caught up to the third heaven and that. But so then what I'm saying is he's calling the sky. Sky and the earth, and it says here, I call heaven, on my Bible it says, I call heaven and earth. So heaven's pretty big, isn't it, compared to the sky? Okay. Well, I understand what the sky is. But heaven's to me is a strong word. Yeah, yeah. But this was Yahweh calling on, right? Or was it Moses was? Where it says, "For Adonai your God is consuming fire." It goes on, "Form anything in your sight. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that you will certainly be carried off quickly from the land you are crossing over the Jordan to possess." I don't know. I've heard being caught up in the third heaven. So there's like three heavens. Because I looked at it like God was behind the galaxies and all that was another heaven. Hell too, but I don't know about that. But I haven't found that in my Bible yet.
Yeah, I don't know. Mike, maybe he can answer that.
Yeah, well, we got to close, but so heaven obviously is a place, and the earth is a place, and so witnesses are individuals that hear, and so there were witnesses in heaven. His translation says sky, up in the air. So so sometimes translations can be a little bit confusing, but it's the witnesses that were in heaven and the witnesses here on earth. So.
Okay, I think we are out of time. I thank you for the comments. I noticed I was having some difficulty comprehending, so I apologize for that. But thank you for your participation, and Shabbat Shalom.